wanted to show this so we can kind of think about what's happened over the course of time with the family farm. Um, in North Dakota, if you look back to 1992, there were over 31,000 farms with an average size of about 1,200 acres. Fast forward to 2017, um, fewer, like 5,000 fewer farms in the state, but larger by an average of about 200 acres or so. This is the trend that we're seeing that is a little bit of a mixed trend, actually. We're seeing larger farms, fewer farms, but at the same time, we're also seeing kind of a resurgence of some urban agriculture and I would say like some homesteading practices where people are really seeking out just a small number of acres to really grow their own food. Um, but when you look kind of at production agriculture, where we're raising crops to sell, or we're raising produce, or we're raising livestock to sell, this is the picture we see. That generally the number of farms is shrinking, but the size of the farm is growing. And I would say that, in North Dakota, there's a quite a range. You have ranches and farms with tens of thousands of acres, and you have operations that have, a couple hundred acres. So really a vast range. We're going to look at, I'm going to stop sharing this screen and share a couple of other things just to give you a look at how North Dakota ranks in some production of certain commodities. Okay. So hopefully you're all able to see this. Let me see if I can get rid of, okay. This will be quick, but it's very interesting, and North Dakota should be proud because these are the top 10 states for a number of commodities. And you can see the items on the side. Commodities are what are the things farmers produce. So it might be milk, it might be honey, it might be wheat, corn, soybeans. North Dakota has that number one, number two spot for many of these top commodities. So spring wheat, durum, wheat in general, North Dakota, number one. Rye, sunflowers, canola, flaxseed, dry edible beans, pinto beans, North Dakota, all number one in the country. Number two in the country for navy beans, black beans, dry edible peas, and lentils. That's really significant. And then honey, which was really, I did not know that about North Dakota, but in 2020, they were number one in the country for honey production. That's pretty cool. Let me go to this screen. And what you should be seeing is the USDA Census of Agriculture 2017. I am going to put this link in the chat. And what I want you all to do is to log in, click on your county, and just kind of read, like, what are the commodities that are grown in my county? What are the number of farms in my county? See what information surprises you when you get there. So go ahead and click on the link in the chat and go ahead and just spend a couple minutes. Click on, if it's not the county you live in, maybe you serve a very rural county. So just hold the cursor over, click on your county, and read a little bit about what's going on in your county and what commodities are raised in your county. And then we're going to come back. There is a map for Minnesota. When you're on that page, you're just going to have to go back and select Minnesota as a state. It's the United States, it's the USDA egg census, so every state would be in there. I'm just highlighting North Dakota for the purposes of this webinar. But yes, you can look at Minnesota broken down by counties. So a few minutes just to click around in there, do a little perusing and see what you find. And then you can answer this poll, which is what agricultural commodities are produced in your area. That is interesting. And in the Red River Valley, they don't specifically separate sugar beets. I noticed on the map, they highlight sugar beets more in the Northern Valley, not necessarily in the Southern Valley, which I thought was interesting because they are throughout. Okay, so what is produced in your area? We've got grains, wheat, beets, peas, soybeans, livestock, beans, peas, oil seeds, sunflowers, forage, good, beets, potatoes. Anything else that was interesting to you when you went into your county, you clicked on your county and you saw that 2017 egg census report? Anything else that was kind of like, oh, that was a surprise, or I didn't expect that, or I didn't know that? And that you can just put in chat. Anything about that census report that kind of surprised you, something you didn't know? Christmas trees, the annual expenses for operations. Yeah. Anything else? One of the farmers that I recently started working with in northern Minnesota, one of their commodities is grass seed. And that's so interesting to me. You know, we go to a store and we buy a bag of grass seed for our lawns. We don't give a thought to where that grass seed came from, right? Well, there's a farmer, there's a producer out there raising seed for grass. And so it's interesting, the wide range of commodities that we see grown up in our areas now. Oh, that's very exciting, Andrea. So your family grows grass seed. That's very exciting. So fun and different. When I grew up, it was literally wheat and barley were kind of the go-to. Maybe oats once in a while. Very different now. All right. Thank you for doing that with me. Just kind of fun to explore a little bit and get to know. And you will find that when you are working with producers, farm families, ranch families, if you can have a conversation with them about agriculture in general in the area, that will work wonders in building rapport and helping them come back, helping them participate in whatever service you're providing, because they feel like you're understanding. And we'll get into that a little bit more. So that's why I like to do that, just a little digging in for us to understand um, who we're working with and what they're raising, what they're doing out there in all those fields with all those tractors and fence lines and things like that. So let's talk a bit, switch gears a bit, and talk about the culture of farming and ranching. And whenever I talk about this, I always like to start with this term called the agrarian imperative. And the agrarian imperative was coined by a psychologist and a farmer named Michael Roseman, and he lives and works in Iowa. And I love it whenever he doesn't do a ton of um, presenting anymore, but gosh, anytime I have the opportunity to jump in on a webinar that he's doing or read some of his material, I take advantage, because he has such interesting insight into kind of what makes um, a farmer tick, right? Why do they do what they do? So what he has found through working with folks and doing research, he has termed the agrarian imperative. And I have a couple of quotes that really helps us understand this. And one is, to farmers, the land is everything. Ownership of a family farm is the triumphant result of the struggles of multiple generations. Losing the family farm is the ultimate loss, bringing shame to the generation that has let down their forebears and dashing the hopes for successors. And I will tell you, I see this every day. The grief and loss of, sometimes it's not even of losing the farm, it's just the passing it to the next generation and being done. Even though that should be considered success, there's such grief and loss. Most of us, when retirement is near, we're like, yes, we're going to embrace retirement and live life and enjoy. For most farmers, that is not the case. They feel very much like they no longer have a purpose or a voice, that they don't know what to do with their time. And we'll talk more about that later. But along with that, many of our farmers have, and family farms have been in the situation where, because of financial reasons, um, weather related, commodity prices, what have you, they have had to sell the farm outside of the family, or there has not been a next generation. And that cuts to the core of who a farmer is. So here's another quote about the agrarian imperative. The agrarian imperative impels farmers to hang on to their land at all costs. It instills farmers to work incredibly hard, to endure unusual pain and hardship, and to take uncommon risks. And if you work with farmers, you see this and you know this, that at the expense of their health, mental health, physical health, their relationships, their financial security, like at the expense of that, they will hang on to that farm and do what they can to make it work. I work with farmers who literally, I remember driving onto I meet with most of my farmers on the farm. And I drove onto this one farm to meet with a couple. And the husband was out in the skid steer. He was just finishing up doing chores. And the amount of time it took him to step out of that skid steer and walk to the house, it was painful, painful, painful to watch, because he was in so much pain, his joints, his arthritis, but there was no way he was going to be done. No way. And that is the agrarian imperative. So it's important to understand that, because when I talk to farmers who have gone to counseling somewhere else or who have gone in to see their doctor, what have you. And often the message they get is, you need to quit doing what you're doing, or you need to move off the farm, or you need to sell, or whatever the case is. That's like shutting the door to them, and they probably won't be back. It might be true, but in terms of building rapport and helping them increase their wellness, um, it's a conversation that will shut them down. And that is that agrarian imperative. They will stick with it at all costs. Big part of the culture of ag, to understand. All right, let's get into stressors. And let me just check chat here. Oh, good summary of farming in the 1980s for sure. That was, gosh, an incredible time for farmers, and not in a positive way. Actually, I just listened to a book written by Andrea Vogel, and she's one of like the Vogel law firms in North Dakota. She wrote a book and it's called The Farmer's Lawyer, and it's about how it was in the 80s and early 90s when she was working in farmers, new in her career in North Dakota, and the hurdles that they were up against, and the kind of insurmountable odds, and her being that voice that advocated for them. Really an amazing, I mean, it gets a little technical sometimes, but if this is something you're interested, I highly recommend. It's local to North Dakota. She talks about, where she was and the people she was working with. So The Farmer's Lawyer, really interesting. So yes, stressors. At the top of the list are those uncontrollable factors, weather and disaster being right there, right? That any egg producer on some level, they are dependent upon weather for the success or failure of each annual crop, whatever they're raising. Even livestock producers, because they're dependent on the feed being raised to then feed their livestock. And in the drought years we've had in the past, 3 years in Minnesota, it wasn't as bad in North Dakota last year. That's been an issue where people have had to sell their cattle, their dairy cows, because they just could not afford to buy feed and their pastures had dried up. Huge stressor. I learned from a very young age that you watch the weather. And to this day, and I'm in my 50s, I check the weather regularly and watch the western horizon, because that's where our weather comes from, right? What you were getting in North Dakota, we were going to get in Minnesota. And it's just very ingrained, top of mind all the time. And no control. There's no control, nothing we can do. It's the farmers take what Mother Nature hands them and try to do the best with it. Second, under uncontrollable factors, are the commodity markets, which are sometimes very volatile. If you work with a farmer or rancher, they are probably watching markets on their phone on a daily basis, trying to make decisions about selling, buying, when to sell. Is it going to keep trending up? Is it going to trend down now? I sell now and tomorrow it's up. And why did I do that? Constant wearing stress on producers. And then general uncertainty about what's next, what's coming next, what's the next weed we've got to battle, what's the next regulation we need to adhere to, how do we improve our soil health, how do we improve our animal well-being, how do we learn the new technology, ever changing. And the average age of our farmer is right around 60, a little younger, like 57-ish. So with the uncertainty and the change That gets harder as we get older, right? To keep flowing with that because we don't want risk anymore. We want stability. So all added stressors. Then we have, oh, so this is just a graphic. This is from, this is comparing from the years 2011 to 2013, where we had a really good ag economy. 2012 kind of turned the corner. Comparing those years to 2018, 2019, these are changes in net farm income. So in North Dakota, there was a negative 38% change in net farm income. Minnesota, negative 68%. Significant. Imagine if you were told at the end of the year that that was your pay cut, right? Going back. Most of us would quit our jobs and find a different one, but farmers don't do that because they have a lot of hope and they are instilled with that agrarian imperative and they're looking ahead. They're looking ahead to the next year until there comes a time when some just know that they can't keep going. Another reason why we see farmer suicides being higher than the general population, especially among white males. All right. All right, working down our list of stressors. Farming is one of the highest occupations in terms of injury. So it's a dangerous occupation. If you know many farmers or ranchers, you probably know at least one who is missing some piece of a finger or arm or leg or has ended up in the ER for a farm-related accident or injury. These are occupations that much of our days are spent in isolation, working alone. There is definitely competition out there for land, especially leasing land and renting land. And how I see this play out, and I have actually a very recent example. There's a farmer going through a divorce, really in financial difficulty. I think the third generation on his farm, so his grandpa started it. No kids to pass it on to. So really in a position of needing to sell the farm, but wanting to really hold on as long as he could. And he became suicidal. And his concern when he came out of inpatient was what the community and the neighboring farmers were going to talk about, because he didn't want to lose his ability to continue to rent land from the landlords, the landowners that he was renting from. And there was such competition, and there is such competition for land, that it's a very real fear. And it keeps people from being vulnerable and from asking for help. They really hold it in because they want it to appear to all of the neighbors who are looking to see that the rows are planted straight and that things are sprayed the right way and everything's coming up and livestock's looking good, cows aren't getting out. You want your neighbors to think everything's going fine, so there's not like a per se chink in your armor where they can capitalize on your vulnerability. Sounds harsh, because I also believe farmers are some of the first to jump in and help each other when something goes wrong. But the reality is it's very competitive out there. The increased need for competency, another added stressor, much greater technology than ever before. In fact, it's interesting, just another little egg competence piece, that there's legislation called right to repair, because some of the bigger machinery manufacturing companies, you can't repair those machines when they break down because they need to be hooked up to a special computer. You need to have a tech come out. There's specialty tools that you need to install or take off parts. And that is stressing farmers out because they're breaking down at key times of the year, harvest, planting, and they can't fix it themselves. So suddenly they're waiting for a tech, they're waiting for equipment. They can't, it's another piece that's outside of their control. Okay, irregular and uncertain income, ongoing stressor. Transition and succession. So transitioning the farm from one generation to the next. Many of my clients I work with multiple generations of family because of stressors around transitioning the farm. There's often a lot of conflict, a lot of disagreements, a lot of poor communication, which breaks down the family unit because it's hard to really separate out the family from the business, right? When it's a family farm. So huge issue among our farm families right now. Long solitary work hours, which tie in with the isolation piece. And then barriers to help, which you all know in our rural areas, there's a lack of workforce, there's a lack of resources, there are attitudes and perceptions around mental health and substance use treatment that create a stigma that keep people from seeking help. There's the general feeling on the part of many of our egg producers that they are problem solvers and they are fixers. And why should they need help fixing their emotions, their anxiety, their relationship, their depression, when, you know what, they can fix everything else and they can take care of everything else. So a lot of work to be done around like, it's okay. It's okay to call and talk to somebody. It's okay to get help. And then another barrier, of course, is health insurance. Many of these folks are self-employed with very high deductibles and copays, which of course adds to financial stress when they think about having to seek out services. All right. Anything else that anybody wants to add to the list of ranching and farming stressors? There's a lot of them. We didn't even talk about, you know, regulatory agencies and compliance and keeping current on all of that. Taxes, and I mean, the list can go on. This is just kind of a highlight. But anything else that people want to add to this list? I'm going to charge ahead, but I'll keep an eye on chat. Oh, here's one. Biosolid impact. That's a term. I don't know what that means. I'm assuming it's soil, right? Something to do with soil health. Carmen, if you want to expand on biosolid impact. Or we can all also look it up. Oh, human manure used as fertilizer. Interesting. I had not heard of that. Another consideration. All right. Okay, warning signs. So when we talk about warning signs, many of these are similar as warning signs we would see in anyone, right? That people are isolating, that they're having mood changes, that they're not sleeping at night, substance use is increasing, all of these things. But I just want to spend a couple of moments talking about what maybe some specific warning signs for our farm families might look like. And some of these are if you hear someone talking about selling off land or livestock or equipment, and it just doesn't seem like it kind of fit the plan for their operation, it's coming from nowhere, that is a warning sign. And when I say warning sign, it could be that the person is thinking about suicide. It could be that they're just struggling. It could be that they are in crisis. Something's going on though. And it's like a sign for us to reach out, right? And check in with them. Okay. So abrupt sales of land, livestock, and equipment. Here's my coughing. So sorry about that. Um, I had a phone call a couple of years ago from a gal in North Dakota. Her and her husband were ranchers, and she overheard him in the next room talking about selling off all of their beef, all of their livestock. And she was shocked. Um, Nowhere was that part of the plan. So, um, we talked, and long story short, he was feeling suicidal, very hopeless, and he was working to kind of get things in his mind settled so when he was gone, she wouldn't have to worry about it. But luckily, she heard the conversation. So, again, just out of character or seemingly out of the plan, um, selling of livestock, land, equipment, beat chairs, things like that. Another warning sign when we talk about farmers, ranchers, is if the farm site or the operation seems like it's falling into disrepair and that really wasn't characteristic of how this person farmed. So maybe their fence lines are not being kept up and their cattle are out all the time. Maybe the yard just hasn't been kept up. Things are just falling apart and it's visible, or they themselves are not, their hygiene's going downhill. So that is another one that can be really specific to farmers and ranchers. I also have some situations where um, kind of out of nowhere, the person was really interested in, tying up loose ends, putting the land in a trust, kind of making those preparations for them being gone, which is not a bad thing, very responsible, right? But it was out of character for this person, and they were suicidal. So just some things to think about. One thing that really too is it stands out to me with farmers is if there is no excitement or hope when they're heading into a new growing season or a new calving season or whatever type of operation they run, if there's no excitement about that, that's definitely a warning sign that they're feeling hopeless and we need to check in. Okay, any other notes or thoughts on warning signs? Okay, let's keep going. I have a little clip before we take a little break, more for me and my voice than probably for you all. But um, I'll give you this link at the end. The Red River Farm Network did a podcast series called Transformation, and it was in cooperation with a number of organizations. And it is filled with brief podcasts, easy to listen to, with farmers and people in egg business in North Dakota and Minnesota, all about a variety of struggles that they've gone through. And whenever I am meeting with someone who they might call and say, my brother really needs to talk to somebody, but he doesn't want to, or my daughter is trying to run the farm and it's not going well, but she won't get help. She won't go talk to somebody. I refer them to transformation as a way to just start the conversation. And before we go to break, I just wanted to play you a little clip from a segment my dad did. I picked him up at the farm and drove him up to Grand Forks for him to tell his story, which he was not excited to do, by the way, because, vulnerability and farmers and all that. But he um, talked about in the 80s when things were not good and he was experiencing significant levels of anxiety. um, he talked to someone who worked at the John Deere dealership and they were going to a counselor. And his thought was, if they can do it, I can do it too. And he did. And I just think I was a teenager at the time, and I just think about how that decision changed the trajectory of not just his life and the management of the farm, but our lives as his family. And now we can share it even more broadly, which he absolutely never thought would happen. So just want to share a little clip from that, and then we'll head into a short break.
This is Transformation. During the farm crisis days of the 1980s, Bayou, Minnesota farmer Doug Kramer took the proactive step to meet with a therapist.
Well, there was a fella younger than me who was a salesman for farm equipment, and he told me he was going to a therapist. And at first, I thought that was kind of a waste of time, but he said how much it helped him, so I thought I'd try it. And the first few times I went, I kind of felt like I didn't want nobody to know and nobody to see me.
Right.
But then after a couple of visits, so I guess I didn't care if somebody seen me. I knew I needed help.
When stress becomes too much, take that step to find help. This is Transformation.
So you can just hear in his voice the emotion, right? How hard it was to make that decision. So just wanted to leave you with that. Why don't we take a break until 1:05? So that gives us about 6 minutes. We'll come back and we're going to jump into the video, a dying breed video, and then we'll talk about that right afterwards. Thank you, Andrea. Yes, he did great. Okay, about a 6 minute, 5 minutes now. We're down to 5 minute break, and we'll see you back here. All right, let's come on back. I do want to share a question that came in anonymously to me because I think it's something that I have never had come up, but I think it's such a valid question that it's kind of this underlying pressure. And the question was, um, like, how does perinatal or pregnancy loss, like miscarriage, stillborn, sudden infant death, impact families, particularly when they're concerned with transition planning, like the farm going to the next generation? Um, Really good question. It is there. Like I know families where, um, you know, grandma and grandpa may still be on the farm, young young adults, next generation are farming with grandma and grandpa, working to start the family that in their hopes will have kids that take over the farm. And sometimes it's not going well, or there has been a death or an accident. We'll talk about kids and accidents too. And it that underlying pressure is there because what if there is nobody to take the farm to the next generation? And I had never really thought about it in the context of loss, like perinatal or pregnancy loss. So really good question, really fascinating to think about. Um, I know that apart from not having anybody there, there's also a significant number of our farms that there are kids, but they've chosen to leave and pursue careers of their own and not come back. And the farm is in that place of being farmed by someone not in the family for the first time in a lot of cases over 100 years. So good question. Okay. Next, we're going to take a look at a video called The Dying Breed. This was produced a few years ago in southern Minnesota. I don't know, we kind of stumbled upon it. My Department of Ag colleague in Minnesota and I kind of stumbled on this without even really understanding kind of why it was produced, how it was produced. It is powerful. And so I'm going to show the whole thing. I debated showing just a part of it, but this is a 2-hour training, so we have time. Because I think this really captures the spirit of what we're talking about with the weight of the stressors that our farmers and their families are carrying with them. I will say though, just as a kind of a caution before we step into it, that it could be potentially triggering. There is content in there around suicidal gestures and suicidality. Nothing graphic or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to stop share here. So time to get out the popcorn because you're going to get 15 minutes of a little documentary movie. And I will reshare. Get it all set up here. I don't trust doing links through PowerPoint, so. If you're not seeing it, please let me know in chat. And if you're not hearing the sound also, please let me know. Okay, here we go.
Well, things continue to heat up with China. China now canceling all purchases of U.S. ag products last week. The retaliation came after President Trump announced 10% tariffs on an additional $300 billion of Chinese imports.
How the hell do you expect to get any work done sitting in your truck all day?
Waiting for it to dry out. Heading to Hamels to pick up some sickle sections.
Still on beans?
30 acres left. I just gotta keep the old girl running.
We should be done with corn by the end of the week, so let me know if you need anything.
Thanks, Jerry. I'll let you know. Take care.
All righty.
Morning, Bill.
Hey, what can I get for you today, Jess?
Box of sickle sections.
Still on beans, huh?
Still on beans.
Yeah, sad to see another one go under.
I had no idea they were struggling.
Yeah, folks are kind of private about those things.
Yeah, I guess so.
Put it on the account?
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Now.
Truck stuck.
What can I do?
I better ride home.
That I can do. What you got left?
It's 30 acres.
What kind of yield you get?
Monitor stopped working last week.
Yeah, sometimes I wonder we wouldn't be better off without all this technology anyways.
So what's corporate got you up to today?
Just making the harvest lunch rounds.
I was hoping that's what brought you out here. Starving.
Hey, there's some pop and water in the cooler. Help yourself.
Where's the silver bullets?
You know, the day my boss lets me bring beer to you guys, trust me, you'll be my first stop.
I remember when we were kids, Mom would always deliver us these hot meals. And those little plastic plates with those little dividers in them. My favorite part was the salted nut roll. Planting and harvest were the only times a year we were allowed to have things like that.
You know, every time I see those in the store, I think of your old man. Remember when I used to come out here bringing these meals? Climb up in the cab, do a few rounds. Before I left, he'd always reach down in that compartment underneath the buddy seat and grab me one from his stash. You know, he was the only farmer who ever gave me anything when I came to visit. I'll never forget that.
That's where he always kept us. What a sneaky little bastard.
He was a good one. I mean, even in the bad years, he'd figure out a way to make it work.
Probably, thanks to all the free child labor he got from us kids.
Oh, God, you know what I remember? We must have been about like 12 or 13. Your dad wouldn't let you go to the football game till you straighten out that whole coffee can full of Bedfields. You were so pissed. I rode my bike out here just to help you.
And you smashed your thumb so bad we had to take you to the ER and get stitches? I forgot all about that.
You poured some of your dad's Canadian whiskey.
whiskey.
Fuck! That hurts.
You're such a cheap ass.
Yeah, I remember thinking that back then. But you know, I think it was that kind of mentality. Kept him in the green, everybody else was in the red.
Yeah, probably right.
I know this is what he always dreamed you'd be doing. I just don't think he could have imagined times would be this tough. I hate to bring this up, Jesse, but my hands are tied on this one. I mean, I managed to convince them to give you an extra 30 days. Get some of this crop sold, but that's the best I can do. And I wish there was some...
Marty, I know. You've done enough. It'll be all right. I'll get the loan paid. I got a good feeling about this corn crop. Yeah.
Okay. Well, good. Great. Okay then, well, better get going. Else the teals will be eating cold burgers. Take care, Jesse.
Hey, thanks again.
Oh, hey, Jesse.
I don't want to forget that.
Look, if you ever want to talk or...
Hey, I appreciate that. Come on. All right. Lucky! Come on, boy! Lucky! Come on, let's go! Come on, Lucky! There you are. I don't know why I take you with me. I don't know why. I don't know. Come on. Come on. Hi, babe. I'm just winding down for the night. How are the kids? Sick of lake life yet? Can I talk to them? Yeah, I miss you too. You know I can't be there. We already talked about this. Mitch, why would you do that? No, you don't ever hit your sister. You two are family, you gotta take care of each other. And your mom. Okay, you gotta go easy on her. And you know, someday I might not be there. So I need you guys to stick together. Okay, you hear me? Okay. I love you both very much. Okay, babe. All right. Yeah, see you soon. I love you too, Brianna. Lucky.
I hope everyone can still hear me. I seem to have lost Wi-Fi access there for a second, but luckily the video finished. So, thoughts? Any thoughts? As far as risk factors, can go ahead and utilize Goodness sakes, my Wi-Fi is really not being cooperative. Let's hope that we have it secured now. Yes, you did lose me, but I'm back. So sorry about that. Okay. Yes, Melissa, thank you for that. You could feel his desperation. You could just feel it. The things breaking down, the bills that were due, the equipment waiting for parts to fix equipment, getting stuck. I mean, just one thing after another. Definitely a lot of desperation. What else? What else stuck with others when you saw the video? Any other thoughts? Well, go ahead and put them in chat if you would like to share. And I just like that video because it really captures when we talk about stressors and the pull of the legacy and the generational legacy and not losing the farm and um, making things work even when they're things aren't lining up and they're out of your control. Yes, you can sense the fear of disappointment. Yep. Good question, Carmen. How do you help someone when the help you offer isn't received and or sufficient? Again, you can do what you can do, right? Um, of course, we know that when someone is in a crisis situation, that might be different. If they are harm to themselves or others, that we may be in a position of needing to call for help, whether they want help or not. But apart from that, it's really being supportive. If you don't have the capacity or the tools or resources, it's finding those who do or programs who do and offering those and sharing those, reaching out, sharing that you care. Um, all of those things are really meaningful. Well, we have about a little less than 30 minutes left. So I'm going to um, jump in and get us through the next slides, hoping my internet hangs in there with me. And then at the end, I'll give you the link so you can go ahead and fill out the survey and get the CEU. All right, I'm going to chat a bit about farm youth. Not often a group that we think about when we talk about farm stress or even in the conversation about increased suicides on the farm. But farm kids, just like any kids, they pick up the stress in their environment and they pick up the despair in their environment, right? And so I love this quote. And this was a real person. We did a couple of years ago, did a supporting farm youth presentation. This person came up afterwards and he said that back in the 80s, his son had said to him, "Dad, I have some money in my piggy bank if that will help in any way." That brought me to deep tears as I realized the kids did know what was happening at that time. So just numbers, stats on kids at the farm. There are more than 2 million family farms in the US. About 893,000 youth lived on farms in 2014, and more than half worked on their family farm. The National 4-H Council in 2020 did a survey, and of course 4-H is not just farm or rural. There's often also urban youth in 4-H, but I just thought the numbers were so significant when they asked questions about mental health. And the reports came back that 7 in 10 teens reported experiencing struggles with their mental health. What really stuck out to me was when you scroll down to what makes teens feel stressed and how are teens coping. 67% pretend to feel better to not worry anyone. 65% deal with feelings on their own. 45% try to ignore their feelings or spend more time alone. That's really significant. And when you talk about farm youth who are often, more isolated geographically, that is incredibly significant. Another set of stats that I feel like we can't overlook when it comes to kids on the farm and their mental wellness is their physical safety. So in this country, 300 youth die each year from farm injuries, um, primarily like ATV, tractor, animal injuries. Um, More than one half of the victims of fatal farm injuries die before reaching a physician. Nearly 1/5 die in transit to a hospital. So that just speaks to the rural nature, right? And how far we need to go to get life-saving help. So imagine being a youth on a farm and having peers or kids that you're hearing about being hurt or killed in accidents doing the same kind of work or jobs or responsibilities that you need to go out and do every day. That definitely is a unique stressor that most youth don't have to think about or deal with. So unique stressors for farm youth, and these are things that I have heard from the farm kids that I've worked with. I kind of did um an what's the word I'm looking for? A poll, I guess, um, to get their feelings on this. And one of the main stressors for them was peer and social connections. And that was really around that other kids did not understand the farming lifestyle or the responsibilities they had on the farm. And also that they did not have the capacity to participate in all of the activities and in events that their non-farming peers were able to participate in due to a few factors, financial, distance from farm to town for the activities, and time if they're involved in work on the farm. Um, the stress that their parents are under, their increased need for competency and learning how to run pieces of equipment or do various aspects of work on the farm was a stressor. The pressure to take over the farm was a stressor. They're feeling like they had to, even if they didn't want to. And also the feeling like I really want a farm, but the farm is not going to still be around by the time I get old enough to do that. And then workload, I have a few kiddos on my caseload that, especially on dairy farms where they are getting up at 4:30 in the morning, going out and doing chores prior to coming back in the house and getting ready and going to school. Then the overall fear of losing the farm and what that would mean for them, for their life, for, where would I live? What will I do? I keep my animals? Do we have to live in town? I mean, a lot of just unknown. And that fear often sits on their shoulders through their growing up. And then, of course, all of the stressors that every kiddo experiences, right? Relationships with friends and significant others, their own self-concept, how we're going to make money, um, their grades and their academic, school-related issues, and then what I'm going to do in the future. So just some things to keep in mind if farm youth are a group of people that you serve in your work. And then a few notes on treatment considerations. So I talked earlier about techniques for building rapport, and the farming and ranching, the egg producer community, relationships tend to be very meaningful to them. When people come in to communities that aren't from the community. There's a level of kind of automatic distrust when they are going in to see a clinician or a doctor or a care provider that doesn't have any farming background. There's often automatic distrust. So some things you can do to build rapport is just, really be personable, introducing yourself, shaking hands, knowing their name, making eye contact, asking questions, hearing what they're saying, using your active listening skills. A lot of the same things that our goal is to be that way with all of our clients, right? But when we're working with any client where trust is an issue, um, and we're trying to build rapport, to build a relationship with them, these are just good, effective techniques. The last one, reserving judgment, that really comes into play when sometimes we tend to want to make judgment calls or suggest things to them around like stopping farming, um, leaving the farm, divorcing your spouse to get away from the farm. Those are all things I've heard from some of my clients that, again, like I said, just kind of shuts the door. Some therapy approaches that I have found to be helpful are CBT, DBT, and ACT. And of course, I think every therapy approach has positives that work with potentially any group of people that you're working with. But these are some that I definitely use on a daily basis. Let's talk about them very briefly. CBT, of course, is really focusing in on those thought patterns, how they affect your emotions, which in turn can affect your functioning. I use this a lot with my egg producer clients. So we talk through, is this a helpful way of thinking? How are you feeling when you have that thought? How can you reframe that thought to then change your feelings, emotions, and functioning? Really big focus on learning how to relax and reduce stress and increase positive coping. Then we have DBT. Really helpful. I feel like especially all of it is, but the distress tolerance, the emotional regulation are two really big pieces that I think a lot of our farmers in stress struggle with, and mindfulness. So working with them to manage painful emotions, decrease conflict, be more mindful, be more present, handle distress when it comes up, regulate their emotions. And then acceptance and commitment therapy, that's a newer one for me. I have not been to a training. I have ordered one of the workbooks and I'm working my way through that, but right away found really helpful tools in helping the client accept their reactions and be present. The focus is not really on changing your thought. It's accepting, these are the thoughts I have. This is where I'm at. If I choose a value direction that will help me, what is causing me to not choose to choose a direction that's not helping me? And then taking action. So it's very much about acceptance and work with what you have. Okay, and then a few notes on discharge planning, because I feel like this is such a challenge when we are discharging patients either from a medical facility or a psychiatric unit or program, and they're living in a community where there aren't a ton of resources or they're heading into a busy season. Like I have clients who, we've been meeting weekly. They're still struggling. We should continue to meet weekly to continue to work on those coping skills. But guess what? Planting is starting or harvest is starting and not going to happen. And so, we need to look at realistically where are they at with not necessarily commitment, although that's a part of it, but in their um, season, what's going to be realistic. So thinking about, how asking them, how will you know you're ready to leave the program or leave the hospital? If it's around a psychiatric concern, what does that safety plan look like? We know that the vast majority of our farm families have guns, have weapons, um, have firearms. And so, what's the plan for that? Is that part of what needs to be addressed? Is that not part of the risk factor for that person? Can family take the guns? My client, who I talked about just a little bit ago, his sister, when he was hospitalized, went to the farm and kind of rounded up all the guns out of the house and the sheds and what have you, and secured them at her home. For other people, not it's the guns aren't part of the risk factor, but it definitely is something that I have heard more than one farmer say keeps them from seeking help, because they don't want someone to take their guns from them. So it's something that we can't underestimate the impact of. Medications is also another issue that I run into a lot with my farmers, primarily them not taking them as prescribed. I have farmers that, have finally made the step, and they've gone in and they have been prescribed like an anxiety med or a med for depression. And because their schedule is fairly chaotic, they don't have good routine, um, they don't take it when they're supposed to. And so it's not effective. So then they quit taking it because it's not whatever. And so a lot of work on helping them set up how that medication piece is gonna work, and then how they're gonna get their meds. Because if they're running out and they need to, drive to town, which is 45 minutes away, and get a refill in the middle of a busy season, it's not unusual for them to go without meds for a time. So looking at, are there mail options where their meds can kind of automatically be refilled and mailed to them, things like that. What is the home environment like? Who are they farming with, and what are those relationships like? Is there a lot of stress? Are there people that can provide them support that are right there on the farm, or is that a cause of a lot of the distress? So getting a feel for what that's like, because they're often isolated on the farm site doing their work, and they're not always getting out and about with other people or being seen in town or what have you. And then what does follow-up for prescriptions and therapy look like? That follow-up piece is huge. I have a few clients who, ideally they should have come back and from their programs and done an IOP or a PHP, and for multiple different reasons they didn't. Either it was only a virtual option and their broadband is bad, or they had to go back to work. They couldn't afford to spend all day, in a PHP setting. So really looking at what is realistic that they are going to commit to versus these are our kind of standard discharge plans. Okay, I saw something in chat. I'm just going to run back to that. Okay, just a comment regarding farm youth. One thing that tends to not be discussed much is family home responsibilities and contributions if they aren't directly doing farm work. Oh, so true. Like caring for siblings, meals, cleaning, etc., as well as deeply ingrained reinforced values for responsibility. Absolutely. Absolutely. There can be a multitude of responsibilities on our farm youth. The one, if I had to kind of name a standard diagnosis among the farm youth I see, it's definitely anxiety. Always that worry. Am I doing enough? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it fast enough? Is somebody going to be stressed with me? Am I adding to the stress that already exists? So really good. Thank you for sharing that. Some of this we've talked about, realistic expectations post-discharge. So understand the realistic availability of virtual therapy, text, and email. Many farm, I just had a call with a farm family yesterday, and it was a couple, older couple. And I mean, she still had a flip phone, and they got me pulled up on their iPad, but the audio didn't work. And there are very real technology glitches out there, including broadband access, that's just not great for many of our rural areas. Check in on their realistic belief in medication. There's a lot of stigma around medication. So see if it's something that they are in agreement and will give a try. What does their support system look like? Reviewing warning signs and strategies to manage those warning signs. Like, what do you do when you start to feel like this? What do you do when this thought comes into your mind? And get a sense of realistically, what is their belief and willingness to participate in therapy ongoing? And that's not just mental health therapy. If they're there for a physical condition, are they committed to physical therapy? And what will it take to help them gain that commitment? And then looking at what is available in their community. I mean, a lot of these communities, we're talking about very small populations, minimal resources. So sometimes we really need to get creative and think out of the box. That's why I love, love, love working with extension and working with public health. So think about like what is in your community, what is in your county or your area that you can tap into to support these clients that you're working with. So along those same lines, if you or your organization is doing any type of like outreach or initiatives around farming or ranching or reaching farmers and ranchers, I get this question all the time. Like, we have the resources, but they're not coming to the table. Like, our phone is not ringing. They're not reaching out. And many times they won't, again, unless there's some partnership with a trusted known entity. So this list is just a list of ideas of people that your agency or organization could potentially partner with if you are trying to get your services out to farmers or ranchers. So it might be commodity groups or your farmers unions, your farm bureaus, doctors, your medical providers in rural communities. There's often much more comfort in seeking care from their primary care doc versus a counselor or therapist. Clergy, rural clergy are such an important part of the wellness and support of our farmer and ranch families. We have USDA and North Dakota Farm Service Agencies, NDSU Extension, great resource in North Dakota. I work a lot with them. There's a number of civic organizations in our rural communities, and sometimes lenders. It depends. There are lenders out there that are deeply understanding and have empathy and are really willing to work with folks. And then there are those that are not. So we have to be careful sometimes with our lenders. I love Andrea's suggestion. Test plot tours bring goodies and drinks. So if you know there's a test plot tour going on in your community, or there's a drought relief meeting that the governor is going out to, or whatever, and you want your agency to have an audience or an appearance or influence with farmers and ranchers, be where they're at. All right. This is the Transformation podcast that I was talking about. This is just kind of a snapshot of some of the topics. And that can be found at RRFN, Red River Farm Network.com/transformation. Lots of great podcasts on there. All right. And then I just put, and I can send these slides out to a couple of additional resources. I put NDSU Extension. They have a great safety and health segment to their work that includes like farmer stress and wellness, farm family stress and wellness. And then in North Dakota, you have Together Counseling Group that offers farm to farm therapy, and that is a grant covered counseling option for North Dakota farmers and ranchers. So their website is there. It's togethercounselinggroup.com/farm to farm.